should we be feeling better about Alexander Mattison than we did a month ago? That and more this week on the couch. Paul Charchian. It's been quite a month of inactivity, actually, for Alexander Mattison. But did he find himself in a better spot based on what we know now than we knew a month ago?
I would say about the same. He was the presumed starter, and he is the starter. Interestingly, at halftime of one of the preseason games, he called himself the bell cow. And I don't think that came out of nowhere. I think he's been told he's the bell cow. But I will say this. Ty Chandler's looked pretty good. He didn't like rip off, 50-yard runs, but here's what he did. Caught the ball well, yards after the catch, pass blocked well, and has got a little bit of burst in him that Mattison just doesn't have. And I think a little better vision too. And we saw it last preseason from Ty Chandler. We saw it this preseason from Ty Chandler. They did not make a move on Kareem Hunt, although they moved on Myles Gaskin today, but I don't think that really matters here. Not meaningfully. Ty Chandler is going to be week one. He's going to be the pass catching back on third down. I earnestly believe that. Alexander Mattison is not so good a runner that you automatically assume he's going to start and finish the season as the number one. There's a scenario here where Mattison just looks okay, and Ty Chandler just starts eating into his workload. Maybe make some big plays, and we might, at some point down the road, by Halloween, I really can't assure you that this thing holds the way I'm describing it now. I just think Chandler's the better back, and I just think in time, and I don't know if it's this year, if it's next spring, at some point, I feel like Ty Chandler is gonna be a factor here.
Yeah, wow. Definitive. It's great because you said definitively the last time I think we talked, or one of the other times we talked this year, that Dalvin Cook was not going to be on the Vikings roster come week one, and that came to pass. Well, that's interesting because I think you really put a good point on it. It's draft season, like the home leagues are happening, the final drafts are happening. At the same time, I have, for the last couple of weeks, Paul, as I'm doing the shows, I'm more focused on that adjustment period, the first 4 weeks. And you even bring up a longer adjustment period, or at the very least, as we've been looking at a static picture, like a still life when we're drafting, it's about to start moving. And we better be ready and at least have our minds open to the possibilities. Because then if Ty Chandler gets 8 carries for 43 yards, and 2 receptions for 21 yards and does a few things in week one, that starts to create that precursor. And whether you believe or not that Ty Chandler is the better player, if having your mind open to that can give you that drop on everybody else to make that move to sell Alexander Mattison high, so that, you can set up a scenario where Alexander Mattison can still be producing. But like you said, there's some things that Ty Chandler offers that he doesn't. I did hear or hint, and this is one of the things that's changing, Paul, as we've been doing this for a long time. Yeah. Beat reporters can't talk about things. It's depending on the camp, right? Like they can't report everything they see, right? They're not truly just your eyes and ears at practices. And I did see some hints. I think maybe it was the Athletic Vikings beat writer that Mattison has been running some different route concepts out of the backfield. Maybe they're more open to what he can do in the passing game. Is there anything you've been hearing along those lines, or otherwise, along with Mattison saying, I'm the bell cow, which he probably got permission to say that, or he certainly didn't get pushback when he did say it. Is there anything else on the positive side or anything else we learned? Because Mattison was banged up, so there wasn't a lot of practice reports or clips like we saw for so many other players saying, here we go.
Yeah. They do want to get Mattison more involved in the passing game than he has in the past, but we don't have reason to believe that he's just a natural receiver. I don't think he's got hands of stone, but I don't see him being more than 2 catch, 18 yards a game. That's Alexander Mattison to me, based on everything that we've ever seen. I don't think that's going to materialize in a meaningful way. And the good thing about Mattison as a non-special talent, this Viking offense could be really, really good, like top 5 in the NFL points. And it might not matter that Alexander Mattison is an average NFL starting back. he's just along for the ride, and he just takes what that offense gives him. And I'm saying that in part, Sig, because really the whole story of Vikings preseason, without a doubt, is what we've seen from Jordan Addison. This kid's, by everything that we've seen, is really special. And, it's been, okay, I'm not saying Jordan Addison's Randy Moss. I haven't seen a receiver come through camp, including Justin Jefferson, that has been so ready to hit the field running than Jordan Addison. It is the separation, the downfield ability, the hands, right place, the footwork. I mean, it's all there. It's so productive in college, and it's just picked up right where it left off. Jordan Addison, unlike Justin Jefferson, who wasn't even the starter for the first couple of weeks of the season, Addison's going to be your week one starter, can make an impact really immediately. And he's going to take, this is another X factor on Jordan Addison. Sig, last 5 years, only Devontae Adams had more touchdowns from inside the 5-yard line than Adam Thielen had. Addison's walking into those routes. Right. And, he's going to face a whole season of single coverage. He's going to get these short yardage routes. It's going to be, there's really some freaky upside with this kid, because the talent it's just so apparent that he belongs based on what we've seen right now. And, I'm not saying it's a lock, but, I've got him ranked number 34 on my cheat sheet. I'm feeling good about that spot based on everything that I've seen out of Jordan Addison. And I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be productive early in his career. And there aren't a lot of rookie receivers that make you say, yeah, he's somebody you could flex in week one.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that Addison and Zay Flowers, those are the two, I think. And Smith and Jigba was back at practice, but I don't know that he's as set up for immediate value or ceiling, passing game ceiling.
Yeah.
And Flowers and Addison, I think Smith and Jigba is the number 3 in any scenario, where Flowers and Addison could be more prominent. I love that, though. I love the taking it strong to the hole. I want to know your thoughts real quick, because another big change for the Vikings. We always start with the Vikings, but it's an interesting team this year. And I know their offensive line, I think Brian O'Neill looked okay in camp, right? Like he's
okay. Back off the Achilles.
Yeah. They've got a young offensive line. They've got continuity on the offensive line. That's always good. Second year in Kevin O'Connell's offense. That's good. Everyone's going to be fluent in that offense. What is really funny to read, and I shared this, Paul, because I think that one of the more underrated aspects of the narratives inside of a team is the offense versus defense tension, right? Buddy Ryan, and right? I mean, going back to good old days.
Who'd he punch? Houston.
It was under Jerry Glanville. I can picture his face with the mustache, but I can't remember who it was.
I can too. Our listeners will get it.
Yeah, of course. My brain's too old.
Kevin
Gilbride.
Yes. Gilbride. That's Kevin it. Gilbride. All right, we pieced it together.
Yeah,
nicely done.
We did. Yeah, we should have this Jeopardy music playing or something like that while we're doing that. Offense versus defense tension is a real thing for some teams, and it's where the head coach comes in. But it's also something that it can be a motivating factor, but can also be sources of hard feelings. I saw the account and I shared it with everybody because I thought this is a really good story to show folks how the goals of a team and the goals of the offense and the goals of the defense, it's not a perfect Venn diagram, right? The overlap is not as necessarily as big as you might want if you're the head coach and you're overseeing it all. So Brian Flores comes in, and that's the other big thing. You got Flo. And, the one thing he's going to do is he's going to set the tone. His defense is going to set the tone. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to say, what can you make the right choice? Right. Like the old movie, Dennis Hopper, right? Like Speed, I think it was, pop quiz, right? There's a lot of pop quizzes if you are facing a quarterback facing Brian Flores' defense. And of course, they're installing the defense. And I saw Kirk Cousins saying, sometimes I would look over, palms up at the coach, like, what do you want me to do when they're showing these looks?
Good, yeah.
But there was also a thought that could have helped Cousins, because he said that now in week one, it's going to seem easier. It's not going to seem so tough, even though it didn't necessarily give the offense as much of an opportunity to work on what they wanted to work on, right? To do their reps to tighten everything up. What were your thoughts on that? What are you hearing about the addition of Brian Flores and how it's changing the team?
So Vikings defense is materially very, very different. Ed Donatell's passive defense is out the window. It was awful last year. I think, had it been realistic to make a change halfway through, they probably would have. Brian Flores is the exact opposite. It's attacking. It's a ton of pre-snap disguises. You're going to see, go back to the days of Harrison Smith, safety Harrison Smith, pre-snap at the line of scrimmage. What the hell are you going to do about that? Are we going to run? We're going to blitz him because he's great. He's a great blitzer. Or is he going to pick up the tight end? Is he going to pick up the slot receiver? Or is he just going to wheel back to his safety position? You're going to see a ton of activity, and they're going to be willing to get burned some of the times. And I think it's going to make them a better fantasy defense because they're just going to get more big plays out of the system that they've got here, and points be damned. And especially if your league doesn't care about points allowed.
Yeah.
So, and playing with this offense the Vikings have got, with all the talent they've got, they're going to play with a lot of leads. Teams are going to get scripted to the pass a lot. And there's not a lot of great players on this defense, but I do believe the scheme's going to be better. They finished, I believe, 29th in points allowed and 31st in yards allowed last year. Yeah. They almost can't be worse.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Even if they're down there, but they force more turnovers and get more sacks, then that's a success.
We'll
I hope it's a big year for the Vikings. I hope the Vikings repeat as division champs and actually win a playoff game. If only, Paul, to run counter to the very one note analysis. Oh, they won all those one score games. That's going to regress to the mean. Okay. But there's more to knowing team. There's
the other regression, and sure, they're not going to win 11 one-score games, but the other regression is the defense just can't be as bad. And if they regress to the 20th best defense, that some part of those 11 one-score games go their way too. So and I'm trying to be realistic about it, but the Vegas line is 8.5. They're going from 13 wins to 8.5 wins.
No.
That seems
not with Chicago. Now Detroit winning the division, I can buy as credible.
I can too.
But Minnesota making the playoffs, I think they're one of the. However you sort out, come on, look at the NFC. That's what they start with. Tampa Bay. By the way, you want a team defense. You still play in those archaic fantasy football leagues. I love them with team defense. Minnesota gets Tampa Bay week 1 if I recall correctly.
That is correct.
And Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of streaming defenses anyway. So get that Vikings defense. You got Brian Flores, element of surprise, and it should be fun. And I'm just glad that I'm just really glad, Paul, that after everything that happened with Brian Flores and the circumstances that he left Miami, it was kind of under the radar that Mike Tomlin brought him in. I know the Steelers really benefited from his presence, and otherwise his presence was felt in Pittsburgh. And now here he is back having a big influence on football games and making football more fun to watch. Okay. I guess let's do the kind thing. I want to just simulate, Paul, like you did you went out to lunch today, right? And as you were leaving lunch, you ran into one of your friends who knows you're a fantasy football maven and says, "Oh, I've got my draft tonight. I'm going to be busy all day. I've got 2 minutes. Tell me, from all your fantasy football acumen and expertise, what are a couple of things that if you caught someone right before they were going to the draft that you would want them to be thinking about? Anything, it can be strategy, it can be individual player takes, just anything that you think are the most important things right now as people go into their drafts."
Well, my biggest overriding when I go back and look at all the drafts I've done, 0 of them don't have one of the 6 proven tight ends. To me, this is just foundational to my belief system on how I'm drafting. Kelsey, Andrews, Waller, Hawkinson, Goddard, Kittle. And I'm not playing that game. Sig, Sunday morning, I'm not rolling out of bed with my sphincter tightening going, is Cole Kmet going to get me one catch for 10 yards and end my Sunday? I can't live like that. I want, TJ Hawkinson in his Minnesota games was prorated out to 140 targets. I don't want to play games at the tight end position. It's been this way for a long time, but the delineation between the 6 proven guys and the rest of the pack, some of them might pan out, but are you so smart that Cole Kmet's going to pan out and you're ready to virtually bank your season on finding one, or are you going to play short suited? So that's one of the key things for me is the tight end. The other If I can't,
That
I
makes
want to
sense.
go get the rushing quarterbacks because they break open your scoring system. It's the, we've talked about it for many years. Fantasy football scoring systems weren't designed for quarterbacks who are going to run for 80 yards and get a rushing touchdown. I want those guys. And if I can't get those guys, now I'm waiting till round 11. I'll take Geno Smith. I'll take Kirk Cousins. I'll take Daniel Jones, and I'll be perfectly happy with that. And then my second quarterback on all of my leagues is Sam Howell. I'm so in on Sam Howell, Sig. All the traits for the perfect fantasy sleeper. You get the mobility. You don't get the Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson mobility. You get the white guy mobility, the Daniel Jones mobility. But that's, 30, 40, 50 yards. You get a chance at a touchdown. And then he's got the big arm. And downfield passers are what we want in fantasy. There's a reason that Jimmy Garoppolo was never a great fantasy producer. We want strong arm quarterbacks that make big plays. You can't do that throwing 5 yards downfield. That's what I love about Sam Howell is based on what we've seen so far. They're slinging it downfield to Jahan Dotson, who I love as well. So those are some of the traits. Those are some of the traits of my drafts.
Yeah, I like it's with Sam Howell also. It's just like you were talking about with Alexander Madison. When you're putting a chip, we use the name of the player as the reference to what you're adding to your fantasy football team, your portfolio. But really, it represents an intersection of a lot of different factors. And it's why when people say quarterback wins, wins on a quarterback stat, insightful when you say wins isn't a quarterback statistic. Anyway, you're putting a chip on the Vikings offense, right? Madison, and look, Madison's a 5th or 6th round pick. So even if he just is the guy for the first 8 or 10 weeks, but most weeks gets, 80 to 120 total yards, maybe averages like a couple of receptions and a touchdown every other week, or maybe not a touchdown every week, maybe more.
That's about right.
Because it's the Vikings offense. And likewise with Howell, you're looking at the Washington offense. And like you said, the offensive line is really, I think, the only potential critical point of failure. And then we'll see about Eric Bieniemy, another guy a la Brian Flores, fiery. And it's very different this year than it was the year before. And we've heard some things come out about how it's different. I think that we can, if we believe in the coach, then we should overall think it's a positive in the long haul. And Sam Howell, I love that you mentioned Jahan Dotson. I think Jahan Dotson could be a player real quick, especially with Terry McLaurin coming in with turf toe. He could play a player really quick that we say, how did we let him fall to the 7th, 8th, 9th round in every draft? How did that happen? Because as a rookie, he was really impressive in a way that he wasn't expected to be impressive. And otherwise, everything else says that, he's going to continue to grow as a player. So what's that going to look like? That's fun. I want to, I agree with you on rushing touchdowns. Really quick, just as one of the elders, as one of the elder statesmen of fantasy football. As you said, I think this is a good point to bring this up, Paul. We tackle the hard-hitting fantasy football issues here. As you said, because there was just a statistic, like the number, I don't remember what it was, Paul. It was like the number of rushing seasons over a certain number of yardage threshold or something from a quarterback. Like most of them have happened in the last 5 years, something like that, right? Like running quarterbacks is a trend in the NFL. And like you said, a trend that fantasy football scoring did not anticipate. And now even, what's up, JJ, the late round quarterback, folks, I mean, quarterbacks going in the 3rd round, maybe even the 2nd round.
Yeah.
Even in the staunch, don't take a quarterback early leagues. So what do you think is the right move here? Is the right move, because, we've had super flex, PPR. I think those were the 2 biggest changes to fantasy football that were actually, compared to like the larger communities of our country and our states and our cities, a pretty responsive, progressive way to say, okay, this is imbalanced. Yeah. This is not fair, or it creates inefficiencies. Let's try to correct them. PPR came in to correct against stud running back drafting. Superflex came in because quarterback was kind of boring, but now you have rushing quarterbacks adding more to this. So is the right answer do nothing? Who cares? Whatever. We're not going to tinker with this. Is the right answer make passing worth more? Make passing worth more. So passing quarterbacks are the passing element of a quarterback's game, but therefore also making the quarterback position more important, which might be a happy accident, honestly, in one quarterback league to make the quarterback more important. Or is it to make rushing less important? Is it to devalue rushing so that, again, like stud running back drafting, quarterback drafting doesn't take on a one note approach?
Doesn't it feel wrong to devalue a good player? I mean, I hate
Yeah,
this. I just
right,
hate that
right.
notion. Like, Jalen Hurts. I don't want to devalue Jalen Hurts in any way because he's so great. He's my number one ranked quarterback, and I think he should be for everybody. Tush push, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, Jalen Hurts. What do you give me his rushing touchdown total, factoring in that they have an unstoppable play from inside the 3-yard line.
Right.
What do you think? Give me his rushing
14, 12 to 14. What Matt Patanti brought up when I had him on the couch recently is this is a copycat league. Look for other teams to adopt this play.
Yes.
And my guy. So I wanted to talk about your tight end point, but I think you're right. And I want to drill down a little bit on some of the guys that you did not make your list of 6. But for those that are just going to really try to take the tank to E at tight end, there's the rookies. Any of them could hit. Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid and Luke Musgrave. Outside of those guys, and I suppose there's Chiggy Okonkwo, but boy, the Titans have this stink of death about them.
Don't they though?
Yeah, it just doesn't feel. I mean, and then somehow Derrick Henry is still going to rise above, like some post-apocalyptic movie. He's still gonna thrash and his way through there and help fantasy teams that try. Because betting against Derrick Henry has not gone well in fantasy football. But I digress. Taysom Hill. I think Taysom Hill is a really interesting tight end, especially when you factor in they were already using him as a short yardage back, wishbone kind of player, and then you add in the tush push. Now we're talking.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about him as a tush push.
Yeah, right on. Why not? Yeah, right.
That's really interesting.
And I think Matt Patanti, I'm gonna give him credit. He brought it up first. But or what other teams? What other teams are going to start to use this play? Because getting that 1 yard when you go into that heavy set, it just isn't as easy as it used to be. When we were kids, it was always like, here they go from the 1. Here's the 1 yard plunge over the top or whatever.
Right.
The fridge. But now,
the fridge.
Teams, when you run, I think Warren Sharp was talking about this. When you run in the red zone out of sets that aren't run sets, it works. But running out of those sets isn't as successful. Or I don't know, someone's going to bring up some numbers and say yes, it is, but it doesn't feel like it is. We need more tush push. Sounds like from your answer though that you're saying maybe closer to leave it alone, or if anything,
I'm leave it alone. I am mostly leave it alone now because I think it's healthy to have a differentiation between great and. We've lived through an era where the quarterbacks were all very tightly packed and nobody had any real value. We're all playing in one quarterback leagues. If you dial back the clock just 10 years, 8 years, 7 years, and it was very hard to get quarterbacks to separate themselves. I think it's great that there's so much separation in potential between, 1 through 12 or 1 through 18 at quarterback. And it's part of why we love Superflex too. Speaking of big bodied quarterbacks and guys that could potentially be push candidates. Where do you stand in Deshaun Watson? The training camp reports have been bad. The games last year were bad.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's a runner anymore. Where are you on Deshaun Watson?
No. I just traded Deshaun Watson. I took over a dynasty league. What's up, Lang and Bob and the rest of the guys in Red Eye? That's an OG group of fantasy football people. Red Eye football guys absorbed them with John Norton and Bob Henry. I think that's how we got Gene Pramel too.
Oh wow! Dang.
Yeah, Red Eye Sports. And I got to be in the OG Red Eye League that I think has been around. They just finally invited me in like 30 years or something like that. I traded Deshaun Watson for a 2nd round pick in a dynasty league. In a salary cap contract dynasty league where he was only cost, I don't even know, like 6% of the cap or something like that. He wasn't even really that expensive. But I think that the ship be sinking with Deshaun Watson. Or at the very least, if the ship is sinking, what we have witnessed up to this point, it would be the opening chapters of the story. Okay, there can be turnarounds, but there's no wind in the sails here. There's no positive momentum. There is also a cold weather outdoor schedule. So for just this year, but then from a dynasty perspective, especially because what we're talking about with quarterbacks and the churn and the running, I mean, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, Sam Howell, maybe we'll be talking about Desmond Ridder. Maybe Kenny Pickett can be like a discount Joe Burrow. There's another wave coming. So, I'm getting out of my position there on Deshaun Watson. And I also think if you're looking at Amari Cooper or even Elijah Moore, right? Because Elijah Moore's in that same range as Sky Moore or, the boom bust type bench receivers. I think that Jahan Dotson should be going a round or two at least before in your draft, and maybe in hindsight, many rounds before Elijah Moore.
Oh, not close. Yes.
David Njoku's the one guy. And I was going to ask you about David Njoku because you didn't. Now, he's not proven. And you also didn't include Kyle Pitts, and that there's your criteria. He's not proven, kind of. I mean, 1,000-yard season as a rookie kind of is proving it, but it's tough. It's complicated. But David Njoku is the one guy that every single Browns report said it's Njoku. Like, no, you can't cover him. Watson keeps looking to him. So I'm open to Njoku, but I do think that Watson is what last we saw him, he was an elite top 3, top 5 fantasy quarterback. I don't know that he's ever even going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback again.
Agreed. I'm with you on that. In part because, the way he got to the top 10 back then was rushing. Okay, he's in his 7th year. Are the wheels still there? And does Kevin Stefanski want to use him that way? He was getting, last year, he was averaging 4 under Kevin Stefanski. Deshaun Watson averaged 4 design runs per game. And only about, I don't have this top of my head, but it was in the ballpark of 14 yards, 4 carries, 14 yards on design runs. And that's just not who Kevin Stefanski is. I mean, it's Nick Chubb running the ball. So, if we got to rely on Deshaun Watson to just be a passer or primarily a passer, his yardage, his touchdown numbers, he's Derek Carr. I can get that at the 7-Eleven. I don't need to go out of my way to find that.
Right.
I can find that help anywhere.
Yeah. I agree with that. And we'll see. We'll see what happens with Cleveland. We'll see what happens with this move. We're not necessarily evaluating it based on what happened last year, but there's no way to spin what happened last year as positive. No. And if we go back and recontextualize it after 3-4 weeks this year, I think they open with Cincinnati. So, we'll see. Cincinnati's defense is not easy. I mean, Cincinnati's defense is definitely one that they could stub their toe in that first game. So we'll see. Really quick as an aside, since you mentioned Kevin Stefanski, what are they doing to poor Drew Petzing down in Arizona? Are we gonna like send him a fruit basket or something? And I mean, for fantasies, I think I guess the fantasy question would be: do you still take James Conner? Does James Conner show that it doesn't even matter how bad the offense is? But I guess this is a moment of pause for Colt McCoy. Because it sounds like really they wanted Colt McCoy to be able to be the quarterback, and he doesn't have it in him, his arm anymore to be an NFL quarterback. And Stefanski, the Stefanski coaching tree now is underway with Drew Petzing, offensive coordinator down there. He was with him for 9 years. I'm afraid the fruit is not going to be very sweet from that tree, at least not yet.
It's actually, I think we're going to go up the family tree one more step. It's a Mike Zimmer coaching staff. There are 9 coaches in Arizona that coached under Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. So it is a big group that sort of got formulated here in Minnesota now there. James Conner's my number 16 running back just on volume. Okay. Sure, they'll get games scripted out of some, but part of it is he's a finisher at the goal line, which we love. I don't like the offensive line, but he's a finisher at the goal line. They've only got, a couple of weapons to go to outside of him. And obviously they're going to be a terrible team, but you know what? Terrible teams score 17 points a game, and James Conner is a coin flip to have a role in every touchdown they get. So I'm still pretty optimistic on Conner, even though obviously we're all down on the Cardinals and maybe even too far down. I don't know, but it doesn't feel like that organizationally they're playing to win right now. And I don't even think Conner is a particularly special back, but we know that opportunity is the single most important factor for fantasy success. You have to have the ball in your hand and at key moments, and James Conner is going to get all those. So I'd rather have him than say Aaron Jones splitting time virtually down the middle with AJ Dillon.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's going to be interesting. The interesting thing I look forward to in Green Bay is how much was Aaron Rodgers getting in the way of Matt LaFleur's offense? And are we going to see it? Not that it's going to hum, not that it's going to be a well-oiled machine that breaks efficiency records. It's still a middling offense, even in a best case scenario in terms of the NFL rank. Yeah. But does the running game work better? Does the sequencing of the plays and everything make more sense because Jordan Love is just executing them true to what LaFleur wants? But with Conner, running back 16 for Conner, that basically, Paul, represents like take him even around ahead, take him in the 6th. Don't even wait and see.
Take him around early.
Take him around early, which is a pretty strong buy recommendation. But I think absolutely the dust can settle just fine around that take as long as he plays like 13 or 14 games, which probably is that's reasonable.
That's probably fair. Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the
Yeah.
median for him. If we look at games played, he's not going to play 17 games if history is any guide.
No.
But I think, go ahead.
You're not going to regret taking James Conner. I feel like look, I still know you. I know we're talking about the Cardinals, but he's not going to get usurped by any other runner. They barely even have another runner. I think Keontae Ingram's the only guy left standing that I
Amari DiMercato. They kept Amari
I don't know
DiMercato.
who that is.
He was the guy for TCU that when Kendre Miller got hurt in the semifinal game when they upset Michigan.
All right.
Amari DiMercato went off. He had like 150 yards, etc. But the funny thing is, if you look at the Cardinals folks, they're saying Amari DiMercato is on the final roster for now, or he's on the final roster today.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm not saying, it's still as an undrafted free agent, just to make the initial final 53 is like good work. And it could be very auspicious for your career. But so I'm not trying to take DiMercato's name in vain here. But Keontae Ingram is set up. If you're like, well, I want to know who the guy is behind James Conner because of his injury history. It is Keontae Ingram. And it sounds like, and I think it's reasonable to say that you buy when there's blood in the streets, and if people are even letting James Conner fall farther, knowing that Clayton Tune or Joshua Dobbs is going to be the starter in week 1 against Washington. By the way, you're looking for a week 1 defense, Washington.
Yes.
It could be potentially James Conner. But I think what it really stands for, Paul, is the idea that if you've been doing rankings or drafting, once you get to about running back 11 or 12 to running back 27 or 28, it's pretty level. It's more level if you do like the lowest end range of outcomes, the highest end range of outcomes, and you average it out. And there's different flavors. There's guys whose floors are a lot closer to their ceiling. There's guys with high ceilings and low floors.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty vast plateau. It steers me away from going running back in the 4th, maybe in the 5th. If Damien Pierce is still there in the 5th, it's tough to pass on him.
I think he's the most misdrafted player in fantasy football this year.
Third rounder, Pierce. Right? He should be a third rounder.
I'm taking him in the third every draft I can. And if you ask me to pick one player going outside of the first 3 rounds that will be a first rounder next year, Damien Pierce is my guy. He's my guy. And let me make my case. You've got college receiving chops that were not used basically at all by Lovie Smith for no good reason. Now you've got this whole 49ers coaching staff that knows about throwing to running backs. And Damien Pierce in training camp has been catching passes. He's been working on pass pro. I think he's sitting on a 45 to 55 catch season. He's going to chip in way more PPR. Last year at the Stripe, Texans weren't able to get there very much. He only had 9 carries from inside the 5 last year. That's it. Most starting running backs in the NFL bumble their way to like 17. So, I think the touchdown numbers, he only had the 5 touchdowns last year. Damien Pierce is going to get double-digit touchdowns and maybe just rushing, chips in 2 or 3 more receiving touchdowns. And the love of God, he's great. Damien Pierce is a really, really good running back.
He was good.
And so I've got him, way, way over indexed on my ranking, and it's probably emotional. I've got him as running back 8.
That's fine.
You're gonna have to take him there, but that's just my belief that whenever this season's done, he's gonna be one of the 8 best, highest scoring fantasy backs. So I love that guy, and I just pivoting. Just so many of my drafts are pivoting on my ability to get Damien Pierce in the 3rd and 4th round. Love him.
Yeah, I think that you can get away with another guy who might be similar, where they have risen correctly, reasonably in response to what has happened, what we've learned this summer, but maybe not enough, is James Cook. I think we'll see. But these are the 2 most prominent risers, probably. Just a very reasonable, objective reading of things that are coming out of training camp, out of preseason. You should have moved Damien Pierce up. Maybe you didn't move him up to the 3rd round, but in hindsight, we'll look and say that he could be, like you said, even a 1st round pick. Another thing that he has going for him is Texans have a rookie quarterback. Hopefully DeMeco Ryans is going to have that defense ready to play. We'll see. They don't have a lot of star power on that defense, but that can still be okay. They played way above their heads last year. And then their offensive line is much better at run blocking, although they're going to take one of the Steelers. They've got a problem on the interior offensive line, but they've got great tackles. Just the Titus Howard come back from that hand injury. So they're going to be running that definitely to try to protect that quarterback. and keep games more like street fights than shootouts. So I love that. And then with James Cook, it's funny too, because I see, Damien Harris got a touchdown. Okay, Damien Harris's knee is bulky, but he came back for the last preseason, he got a touchdown. I don't care. I mean, James Cook can be a huge hit with Damien Harris scoring 12 or 13 rushing touchdowns. That's not a problem. That's what James Cook is. If he's going to lead this backfield in touches, and he's going to get touches against stressed out defenses that have to defend Josh Allen, etc., then he can still be like an Alvin Kamara, a rookie year Alvin Kamara kind of player with a Mark Ingram there getting his. And I don't think Damien Harris is what Mark Ingram was when that backfield was clicking. Again, I've said this in recent shows. Just because a player is going up doesn't mean they're overvalued. And it might just mean that we haven't moved them up enough. So I think folks need to keep that in mind with Pierce. But otherwise, and like you said, another thing that Pierce opens up is, because Paul, when you said 6 proven, I thought you were going to say running backs. I thought you were going to say 6 proven running backs.
That's about right too, by the way.
That's about right too, because now Josh Jacobs makes it 6, right? If you consider last year proving it. Tony Pollard, not quite proven. Nick Chubb, proven. I guess you could put Derrick Henry in there, but again,
I think
potential disaster. But there's 6, 7 running backs that we really feel confident about. Saquon Barkley. Well, Bijan Robinson's not proven. That's another interesting question when we get down to that word proven. But the point is, there's a lot of perception that after that running back group, there's Jahmyr Gibbs. You can talk about how people feel about him. I'm okay with.
I'm nervous.
Yeah, I mean, he's a 3rd, 4th round pick, and there's a big range of outcomes there. And I think that he absolutely, the 3rd round, especially if you're in the second half of the 3rd round, can be a bit of a stumper. Again, because you just get that feeling, well, I can get someone like that a round later or 2 rounds later. So you don't feel great taking Keenan Allen there. You don't feel great taking Joe Mixon there. You want somebody who at least has a chance to outproduce the 3rd round investment. And Jahmyr Gibbs at least qualifies there. But like you said, Damien Pierce, maybe that should be the guy. Maybe you go Gibbs over Pierce, if only because Pierce has a better chance of being there at their next pick. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you can even skip those top 6 running backs if you feel like I can bank Pierce in the 3rd. So you could do something like start wide receiver near the turn, and then go Pierce, and then get another running back in the 6th or 7th round, because those running backs ranked your J.K. Dobbins. I mean, who knows how far a guy like Breece Hall is going to fall, etc. You can get 6th, 7th running back round values, prices, and who knows, you could get something that delivers a lot more than that.
Well, can I give you a guy right out of that range?
Yes,
that I would love your input on? J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by where he's sitting right now. Running back 26, pick 67 overall. So that puts him sixth round. If I get the feeling, we know it's going to be a different offense with Todd Monken, but it doesn't mean that it could be better for everybody. You're just getting out of the Stone Age, and having a more diverse offense could help all the players. Prior to last year, when basically the whole offense was hurt, Dobbins was hurt, Gus Edwards was hurt. Prior to that, their Baltimore's rank in rushing touchdowns scored was 10th, 3rd, 5th, and 6th the prior 4 years. And I feel like there's some big touchdown upside on J.K. Dobbins. Over his career, 13 goal line carries, 10 touchdowns. That's a 77% conversion rate. I'm really intrigued by J.K. Dobbins, and I feel like too many people are reliving last year when he limped through the season, really wasn't effective until December. I get the feeling he's the kind of guy I want to bank on in the 6th round, because his ability to outperform that is so high.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think the 2 major multipliers for him could be just his talent.
Yeah.
His ability, assuming that we didn't really get to see it until the tail end of last year, and he did finish strong. So if J.K. Dobbins is a breakout player 3 or 4 weeks into the season, you're looking at the team that took Dobbins and feeling like it's unfair that they got Dobbins in the 6th or 7th round. Like the team that got Jacobs was unfair last year, right?
Right.
It's going to be because of his talent, and the foreshadowing was how he finished last year, and then the added plot thickener is, like you said, Todd Monken's offense. This offense plays faster, more efficiently. It takes advantage of what Lamar Jackson offers. I do think, I've said earlier in the summer on the show, Paul, everybody should be taking at least one Raven. We can have a discussion about which Raven, right?
Okay. Now what makes you say that everybody needs to have one Raven on their team?
Because if the entire pie grows, we don't know how much Greg Roman was holding this offense back.
Yeah.
But we heard 2 years ago Lamar Jackson saying it feels like the defense knows the play.
Right.
So we don't know how much that was a limiting factor of the productivity of this offense. We also don't know how much Lamar Jackson not feeling loved, not feeling like the team was committing, the organization was committing to him. How much was that a limiting factor just because of the offense not really getting a chance to get in a groove? There's a lot of things where we could see that this offense just needs offensive tackles to stay healthy. Again, offensive line health, be paying attention to that. Ronnie Stanley, Morgan Moses need these guys to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But if that happens, this offense could take off. This could be one of the best offenses in the league. This offense could do a massive turnaround, and it could make 3 or 4 or 5 overachievers, right? Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, J.K. Dobbins, and at least one of the receivers could all blow their ADPs out of the water. Andrews could be as good as Kelsey. We've already seen it happen once before. Lamar Jackson could be the number 1 fantasy quarterback. J.K. Dobbins could be like a 3rd round, even 2nd round value. If you're just getting him, and this is where the downside comes in, we just want him to get like 15 to 18 touches. And maybe 2 or 3 of those targets, 3 or 4 of those targets.
Yep.
Is that so much to ask? Well, based on how this backfield was run under Roman, it was, right? There was a commitment to mixing in all of these different running backs. So that's going to be something that's going to be a big reveal. They're playing Houston week 1. There's another defense you can take, although they're going
particularly bad run defense.
Yeah, they're playing Houston, so Dobbins could get out of the gate hot, and we're going to see about his usage. Now, the other part of the downside of Dobbins is that he's another one of these drama backs, right? He's another back that is not happy. Now, it's not like Jacobs or Barkley where you got a concession, even if it seems like a token cursory concession. There is some sense of like, okay, here's something. Baltimore didn't give him anything. What Baltimore gave him was Todd Monken saying, I wish he was here. I wish he was here at practice doing something. Right? So,
you know what? Okay, fine. Run mad. You know, if you've got a chip on your shoulder, go run mad. J.K. Dobbins, go run for money. Yes.
That's the thing, is he's only getting like $1 million something this year. As a 2nd round pick, he's not getting barely anything. So unlike Jacobs and Barkley, who are at least getting double-digit $1 million, $10 million plus, they can feel like I'm getting something close to my worth. Jonathan Taylor is going to get paid to be on the PUP for 4 games at least. We'll see what happens with him. But J.K. Dobbins needs to show out this year, or he's getting like a 1-year, $3 million deal with incentives next year. He needs it. Yes. He doesn't have the track record.
I want that. I'm not a big believer in trying to chase down contract year guys, but there are some that really look like they got the chip on the shoulder.
Sure.
And Dobbins has got some of that. Remember last year when people were doubting his health going into the season, and he's on Twitter and he's rebuffing everybody. Dude can play with a chip on his shoulder. He's got some of that emotional part to him.
Yeah.
I want to tap into that with J.K.
Dobbins.
Yeah.
But then again, the people that were saying he didn't look healthy were right. So
they were right. He was wrong. Don't give me that. That's right.
No. It's good. It's good. I mean, I like that. I mean, it's good though to have those convictions. I mean, you should go into your draft with convictions. I mean, this is one of those things, like I teed it up for you, what last second advice. And of course I can give people specific last second advice. I mean, I love David Montgomery. I think David Montgomery is a guy that should be going in the 4th or 5th round. If there's a theme in our talk today, it is there are answers at running back there. You don't necessarily have to go running back early because the market hasn't corrected on some of these guys. And even if the ones that the market is correct on, as far as say Dobbins should be about a 6th or 7th round pick, there's a lot of upside there. There's a lot of upside. Even if you like Ken Walker, you're like Breece Hall, there's upside there, and you can do that. But also, I think have your convictions, have your targets, and then we have lots of time to make up for any misses, and otherwise adorn all of the hits we have and turn it into a champion by the time the season is over. There's going to be so many things. Everybody is going to be wrong about like 40% or more of their takes, and within the first month, you're going to see it right away.
Oh yeah.
And I always bring up the idea, Paul, of the offensive lineman that gives up the sack often recovers the fumble. So when you are wrong about a player, it can give you the clarity to be the first one to act appropriately when you're like, oh boy. And I've always said, from an emotional point of view, this is on the couch, from an emotional point of view, it's those truths that are the toughest to swallow when you're watching it. Like you're watching week 1 and week 2 and you're like, I hate this. But you're watching, you're like, I didn't want, this is not supposed to be what's happening. But if you can turn that emotion into an intuition of, okay, now I know I have to just abandon this, because other people are going to say, I want to see a couple of weeks. Well, this was a 3rd round pick. How do we know he's going to, how do we know Joe Mixon is really used up? I mean, maybe it's just starting slow and Joe Burrow. And you're like, no, I went in too heavy on Mixon. But then you're the first one to start picking up Chase Brown on the waiver wire, or at least you trade Joe Mixon for somebody like Isaiah Pacheco that people haven't realized yet is going to be better than ADP. So it's good to have convictions. It's good to be emotionally invested in your picks. You just have to appropriately interpret the way that you digest that in those first few weeks, and then just ready to be flexible and be agile and accept that we're all going to be really wrong about a lot of things. And even some of the things that we're right about, we're going to be right for the wrong reasons. We're going to be right.
That happens too. Yes.
So, just be agile, be flexible, be nimble. It's fantasy football. Have fun with it.
Yeah. Check. You raised the best point. Check your ego at the door in the first few weeks of the season and be willing to accept your own fallibility and move on. And it's hard to do that, man. We get emotionally invested in our takes. And it usually takes years of beatdowns before you start to accept the fact that you can be wrong. And it helps a lot if you're actually watching your guys. You can go, man, Joe Mixon just doesn't have it. And it just that was an example for me from last year. I'm like, this is a great offense. He's going to get all the carries. Joe Mixon, he's got a good year left in him. And within a few weeks of the season, you're like, dude's plotting. It just the spark is gone. And I'm worried about Mixon for this year. Let me ask you this, if you don't mind me changing the subject just a little bit.
Sure.
You need to this year, say, first 30 picks from all the way from Justin Jefferson to T. Higgins, 9 running backs in 30 picks, say. I never thought this would happen. And I'm stunned. Most of our lives, 7 of the first 12 picks are running backs. And now we've gotten to the point where we're at 9 of the first 30 with Jonathan Taylor falling out. It's been a sea change in drafting philosophy by America, I believe. We just don't. People have gotten to the point where I think we've all been burned so many times and so many high ranked running backs. Jonathan Taylor last year, many others. Joe Mixon, and we were just talking about being wrong on, and it's a noted change from what we've seen in the past. And I think it's the right one. I think America's got it right. What do you think?
Yeah. And I think it's why, again, I'm okay with hero running back. I mean, I hope you have a strong conviction about one of those top 6, 7, 8 running backs. Josh Jacobs in the 2nd round, the year after he was worth a 1st round pick, or even Derrick Henry in the 3rd round, even Damien Pierce, even saying Damien Pierce is the hero running back that you didn't realize was going to be your hero. So wait until the 3rd round, take Damien Pierce, even though everyone's going to say, I would, who fit? He wasn't even in my top 50, but you don't need to stack running backs early. I think it's a great year. You mentioned tight end. This fits into your tight end advice. It makes it so much easier to get one of those top tight ends.
It does.
Mark Andrews, of course, is banged up already. Undisclosed injury, but because I really felt like Andrews in the 2nd, or maybe even if you're lucky, Andrews in the early 3rd is better than Kelsey in the 1st. Then injuries. It's just like Kittle. Kittle was coming off of his first fully healthy offseason, and then he has this adductor issue.
It's always something with Kittle, and that's the hard part, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is because he gives it all over to the game. He that's the whole nature of that's why Travis Kelce really is that unicorn in terms of his ability to stay healthy at this position and continue to produce. But all these things fit together into a comprehensive strategy. You mix in wide receiver, you time your quarterback, like Paul said, get a rushing quarterback. I'm okay with just going and saying, I'm going to take Anthony Richardson in the 7th round. I'm totally fine with that. It can be ugly. It can be a punchline. People can be laughing at the Colts for taking him number 4, and he can still be a hit.
That's right.
Still be a hit for fantasy. Look at Justin Fields last year. Or if not Anthony Richardson, you mentioned Daniel Jones, or even, there's quarterbacks that can save us more. I think super flex quarterback 2 material, but even, Howell and Pickett and Ritter and some of these guys can add some value. They'll have their weeks in a best ball way, and you put the pieces together and let's see what happens. Okay. We're basically there. Is there anything else you want to say before your friend runs off to their running into you?
Last thing. I think the player that I'm most down on versus ADP is Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
I'm a Tank Bigsby guy. I think Bigsby can probably catch better. He can probably be at the goal line better. And I think Etienne's good. He's not great. And I worry he's going to be a lot of 12 carry, 52-yard games,
Sure.
scoreless. He chipped in 2 catches for 18 yards on average last year. That's one of the guys that I've got him at running back 21 right now. I think he's gone off the board
long
like running back 12.
Yeah, long gone. I think that's fair. And I think that Etienne is a really interesting guy when you look at framing somebody's value in terms of preseason usage and coach comments, right? Because at first, Bigsby got like the short yardage carry, and that was about it, right? And Jermichael Hasty gets in maybe on some passing down. So like, oh, okay. It's still Etienne is like the main early down back, the main guy.
Right.
And they even said something like, we want to get him to 1,600 yards or something like that. And then Bigsby did do more in the last preseason game, but he also fumbled at the goal line, and then Etienne scored.
Right.
But at the same time, you also have a coaching staff saying, or beat writer saying, Bigsby's role is going to be whatever X to begin the season, but it has room to grow. There will be open to it growing, almost like telling us like we expect it to grow. Or if the trends continue, it should grow. And the other reason I don't love Etienne, at least at ADP, I think it's a 4th round pick, is first it was his receiving ability, right? Even whenever James Robinson was still there. But they're going to use him as a receiver out of the backfield. He's going to get all what we're saying about Jahmyr Gibbs this year, right? PPR punch. He's been a subpar receiver. And Matt Waldman, I got to always give credit to Matt Waldman. Can't believe it took this long to mention his name. Said, well, they may have plans to use a receiver, but the college tape doesn't say that he should be used as a receiver. Now he did come out of the gate after Robinson was traded last year really hot, but then slowed down. And he is a linear runner. He is a runner. He isn't necessarily a creative runner. Like the name like Tevin Coleman comes to mind. How excited were we to have Tevin Coleman? Maybe he didn't have the pedigree for the draft, but a similar style of runner. So I agree with you. I think that Etienne is fool's gold, but for the same reason you said Madison could hit, Etienne could hit. I mean, the Jacksonville offense could just be another step ahead.
Matter. Yes.
Now, the offensive line.
But if it is that good, Sig, where does Tank Bigsby take the value, the fantasy value? Sure. Does he get the goal line carries that we care about? I'd rather if I get 1 reception for 10 yards, that's worth double the points of rushing for 10 yards. Does he get the fantasy value that Etienne doesn't? And I think Tank Bigsby does. So
that's fair. I mean, the reality is there's so much more room for Bigsby to hit as a pick. Bigsby, even if you say take him in the 9th or 10th round. Etienne, in a best case scenario, Etienne's like a late 2nd round pick value. Like that's your top end. So that is significant in getting a late 2nd round value in the 4th round. But Bigsby could be a 4th or 5th round value. If he has those receptions and touchdowns mixed in and you're getting him in the 9th or 10th, that's probably a bigger win for your team. I keep coming back to that Kamara Ingram idea, though. I always think of this with Montgomery and Gibbs. If the offense is good enough, both running backs can exceed ADP. We might be underestimating the offense. So, but I'm with you. And this all comes back. Sometimes the best clarity you can have is just the players you're not going to take. You just don't want to be on the clock and have that moment where you take a player, Paul, and it's the moment you take the player, the moment the pick is irrevocable, that you realize you messed up. You made it. But only after that moment. Okay. A couple minutes, I guess. I'll check in with you on this.
Well, okay, go ahead.
We've talked about a lot of fun stuff over the years.
Yes.
When we're off the rails. Like if I ever do off the rails, it usually just have to do like the weekly guest.
Can I co-host off the rails?
Yeah, exactly. It's off the rails with Sigmund Bloom and Paul Charchian. I want to check in with you though, because behind me here, you might see some of my records.
I do see some. Yes.
There's some records there. I might be able to make out like over my shoulder, like Axis Bold as Love, or this shoulder. It's beautiful art. You can fold it out. And Record Store Day and all this other fun stuff that's been coming and going. How is because I know when we first started talking, you were not a record guy. And you've become a record guy. Update us on your record guy journey.
So I laugh at this now, and you laughed at me then when I was just going to get into vinyl. And I remember talking to you. It was the days before I was going to buy my first turntable in 20 years. And so I'm going to get the turntable. And I said to you, Sig, here's my big plan. Mm-hmm. I'm going to limit myself to 1 record a month, and I'm going to spend that month like plotting the move, because you don't need
yeah.
vinyl, right? You never need it to hear a song. You
Sure.
can just, you just go, so I'm going to plot it out for a month. That lasted my first trip to the record store, blown up, and I've never gone back to that. So that did not work. Now, what I bought last was, and I think you will know this person.
Yeah.
I've been going through sort of a jazz phase, jazz phase. Do you know Cannonball Adderley?
Oh, hey, yeah, Cannonball Adderley. I want to say, was it like his niece or something like that? Akina Adderley was singing in Austin when I was living back there.
No way.
I've got back here, Mercy, Mercy, Mercy.
Yes.
That's the Cannonball. That's my favorite. I might have another Cannonball Adderley record or two. I think Cannonball Adderley might be on Kind of Blue, like
he is on Kind of Blue. Yes.
Yeah. And absolutely. And Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. Joe Zawinul wrote that song. And Mercy, Mercy, Mercy is just one of the best songs ever written. It's just one of those songs.
Yes.
It's like a gospel. It's a spirit lifter. If that doesn't lift your spirits, then you've got bigger problems.
Yes.
So yeah.
So I've been going back and doing a little jazz right now, which is fun.
Paul, I'm so proud of you. It's so great. I mean, you can just get lost in jazz for a lifetime, really. And I could go. Matt Walden and I also, Matt. A lot of people probably know, or maybe don't know, that Matt originally set out to be a jazz musician and has chops and is a really great musician. And I think he's been learning the bass. I told him as soon as he gigs somewhere, I'm driving. I'm gonna go.
Where does Matt live?
In Georgia, Atlanta area.
Atlanta. Okay.
So we've done some jazz talk, but I get it. Jazz isn't for everybody, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. But if you find that door that opens for you, it can be different artists, different eras, a different instrument. Sometimes it's just an instrument.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you just hear the way, like a jazz could, like listen to the way Wes Montgomery plays the jazz guitar. And I want to hear more jazz guitar, or the organ. Like so many great organ players from the 60s, like funky organ players like Jimmy Smith and so on. And then you just start to pull on that string, Paul, and you start to see, because of the communal nature of the jazz scene, everybody played on everybody else's albums.
Isn't it crazy? Oh, I'm going to start with Miles Davis. Well, okay, that's going to splinter you into the 12 regulars that he played with all the time. Cannonball Adderley being one of them. And you can find so many other great musicians. And part of what I love about that era of jazz, man, you had to be good. Your musicianship had to be so freaking good to have a following back then. And, these are all just remarkable players that were crushing it in the late 50s through like the early 70s, which I feel like, like this 15 years of just amazing jazz. And if you want to pick up trumpet, you could pick up a Miles Davis from the late 50s, late 60s, late 70s, and hear like three totally different trumpets. That guy evolved his play all the time. So, it goes without saying that Miles Davis is amazing, but and
there's so much out there.
There's
so much. I mean, it's truly a lifetime journey. And like you said, I mean, you see how artists change. You see how their perspectives change. Miles Davis was not going to play electric music, and then he heard Jimi Hendrix. He's like, "Oh my God, I have to play." There's so much out there, and so on and so forth. But there's so much out there, and there's. I mean, I would focus on spiritual jazz. Alice Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, rest in peace.
Oh yeah.
Like Pharoah Sanders' Karma and the Creator Has a Master Plan. Like that's just a track that should be like, everybody should be familiar with that track. We need to just do a whole second hour on jazz now. But I think the beautiful thing is that we live in this time when there is like recording technology, and we can hear all this stuff from the past. Because I can remember in college, Paul, dating myself, everybody had the CDs, and most jazz albums, you can fit on a Maxell XL2, you could have an album on each side.
That's right.
You would cross-pollinate each other's collections, and just keep growing and growing and growing and growing your collection, and just absorbing. And it just felt like the world was so massive and huge, and you could never discover all of it. Almost like being an explorer and going places for you, at least, that were brand new places. And jazz just stretches on to infinity. And then you can jump off from jazz into other music genres and everything too. It's all connected, but jazz is the glue. Jazz and hip hop are like the two greatest things the United States have ever given the world. And those two are connected. It all starts at Congo Square.
Yes.
It all starts at Congo Square here in New Orleans. And it always starts the couch with Paul Charchian. And it's a good thing to be back. And we'll be visiting with Paul and everybody else. It's almost here, the season.
Yeah.
We appreciate everybody so much. It's such a joy, a privilege to get to do this as our bargain with the world. I know a lot of you that help us do this. Maybe we help you get through those days. We appreciate that you do that so that we get to have fun. And hopefully it's fun to hang out with Paul as it is for me, for you, because you're so classy.